Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well, and just 2 weeks left to go in your fantasy footy season for 2023. For some, they've been building their squads since mid to late December in 2022, and really, in a 10-day time period, you're going to know the exact outcome of how your 2023 season has gone. For leagues or for rankings, whether it's good news or bad news, 2023 is almost in the can. The good news, though, is right throughout this episode, we're going to help you navigate some of the big conversational points that you need to be processing through for your fantasy footy side for Dream Team, SuperCoach, and AFL Fantasy for round 23. Joining me on this episode as he has right throughout this 2023 season, he is the Harry Sheasel of fantasy football, my friends. MiniMonk, hello, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Are you playing me up forward, down back, or in the midfield today?
Right, mate, wherever you play, you absolutely do it beautifully. You just junk it up a little bit more in the defensive half, but we'll that'll be all right. You'll help us through. It's this interesting time of the year, isn't it, where big portions of the fantasy community that are chasing overall ranks, really outside of a couple of hundred, and it depends on the format you play, are really nowhere near achieving their ultimate objective of finishing top 10, top 100 first. Some are still on track for their number one overall rank for a PB, so there's plenty to play for, but big parts of the community are now like, whatever. And then there's the coaches that are focused on leagues, and then it's all about those nuanced one-for-one head-to-head matchups in either preliminary final action this week or grand final, depending on how they've chosen to run up their leagues. It's this interesting time of year, isn't it, in SuperCoach, Dream Team, and AFL Fantasy Classic and drafts, where the community's in this weird space of super laser-focused, every possession matters, and others are just in the space of, I really don't care.
Yeah, I mean, if you break it down for Classic at the moment, you've built your salary, you've got your team. All you're trying to do now is target the players that you want to own for these last two games. And that makes it very interesting as well, because we had a quick chat before we started this pod. There isn't anyone that massively stands out this week. There isn't a target that you go, oh, this is the Tex Walker of round 23, because, you know, a lot of people are targeting him for next week with that Eagles matchup. But there aren't many players that have that 2-week block of fixtures that you can just go, I want to trade into this player. I want to own him for the last two. Because most of the good targets, most of the players that you consider, you know, top 8, top 6, top 10 of the line, there's flags with them.
Yeah.
Everyone's got concerns about them. Yeah.
It's a weird...
So it just makes it really tricky.
Yeah, it does. For super coaches and dream teamers, if you have a trade left, okay, it's purely tactical at this point. Whether that be for in your ranking, you're just going, okay, is this the week to capitalize, or do I hold ground, use the rolling lockout, use my ability to track what my team opposition have done in the rankings battle up to this week? Have I made adjustments to what they're doing? Have they made trades? Have they been holding? Really, in rankings in those two formats, it's purely tactical and timing, where if you're going for leagues, you're just using that trade this week if it's one left because you need it to get you over the line into the grand final. Or if you're really quite confident, or you have two somehow, okay, well, now there's a different tactic at play. But for AFL Fantasy, I think this is one of the great things about this format of the game. Each format has their own strength and weakness. But for AFL Fantasy, 2 trades a week, use it or lose it, it means we've got the opportunity to look at options, whether it be culling that last cow, throwing away that D8 spot, F8 spot, M10 spot, whatever it is, free up that last bit of cash and maybe fix something up. Or as you've mentioned, start to play some fixtures and some matchups. But when I'm with you, when I look at positionally across forwards, mids, defenders, and using trends of data over the past 5 to 10 weeks, there's one team that on paper, now again, that's all it is, on paper looks like it's a great back-to-back matchup, and that's for Tom Stewart and Mitch Duncan. We talked about them a lot last week, so we don't need to probably dive into that too much, and it didn't really work out massively either, depending on the format you played with either of those guys. But this is this weird place where we can start looking for things underneath rocks that aren't really there, and we can make one trade and actually cost ourselves 100 points if some variables don't go our way.
I mean, you saw it last week. One of the most popular trade-out players in AFL Fantasy last week was Harry Sheezel.
Yeah.
And he goes out and drops 110. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen this week with your trades, but that has to be in your thinking with whoever you're bringing in and whoever you're trading out. And we look at the popular trade-in targets this week. If you run down them in AFL Fantasy, because it's where people are making the most amount of trades.
Yeah, of course.
It's Clayton Oliver, Tom Green, Nick Newman, Zach Butters, Rory Laird. Those are the premiums that people are targeting. All had great games last week. 3 out of the 5 are midfielders as their positional status. You know, Zach Butters is playing in the midfield as well, but his class is a forward. And really, he's probably the one that stands out the most. If you don't own him, he's probably the one I would lean towards. But there's flags associated with all of Oliver, Green, and Laird.
So
their
talk me
matchups
through
are
that, because people hear that and they go, Oliver missed the 110 this year. Even when he's done his hammy, he's still turning up. Laird, barring round 1, I think we could say that is clearly a career aberration in this midfield role. He's still going 110 across the formats. Butters is back to what we know. So talk me through about these 3 guys, about how there's an element of risk to trading into them at different points.
Sure. Let's start with the easy one in Oliver. Are they really going to let him get off the chain? We've already seen what Mitchell has done with taggers this year. If you were going to tag one player on that Melbourne team, who is their most influential?
Midfielder?
It's Clayton Oliver.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is a contested beast. He finds a way to get the ball from inside to outside. If he's got Finn McGuinness or Connor Nash standing next to him and, you know, really just hugging him tight for a lot of the game, it's going to affect his ability to be able to do that. And yes, the matchup the week after against Sydney is a bit better, but it's still not a great matchup. And that's where we go to Rory Laird, because he has that Sydney matchup this week. And yes, he has the really nice West Coast matchup in round 24. But you know what the problem is? He's about the most expensive player in the game. He's 990,000. So you're going to have to be finding a way to get up to him, which isn't going to be easy. And that Sydney matchup isn't, you know, it's not as good as it was 10 weeks ago. They actually look like a half decent team, and they're going to be pushing to make finals. This is going to be a brutal game.
Yeah.
It's going to probably be the game of the round. And then if we go to the last one of those 3, if we go to Tom Green, who do they play this week? Yeah. They've got they got Carlton this week.
Yeah.
Which is the toughest inside mid matchup that you can get.
Over the past,
again,
I think 10 weeks, let alone past 5 weeks. Yeah.
And yes, they've got, you know, that really nice round 24 matchup. I think I've got a mistake here. So they've got Carlton in round 24. They've got Essendon in round 23. So you're not going to want to own him for the last round of the season.
Yeah.
What's
the point of
this
doing
is what we get into? Yeah. And look, there is a time and a place for a 1 week. And we've talked about it a few weeks ago with the 1 weekers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to know where your exit strategy is off of a player like him if you're going him for the 1 week, because there's a certain player that we will talk about as being a 1 week play, because we know it's a one and done. You don't get a second bite of the cherry. Would you like to lead into him?
Yeah, well, you've kind of alluded to a teammate of his by saying the name there in Cherry. Jack Ziebell's this very interesting prospect that I'd like to get your reflections on. In AFL Fantasy, defender, forward, 625,000. I know people jumped into him last week and maybe felt a little underwhelmed with his 90, but that was a weird match in terms of how North Melbourne moved the ball, how Essendon moved the ball, and prior to that, well, he went a 138. Again, if a 90 is a bad game from Jack Ziebell, you'll take it. They play Richmond this week. From a scoring perspective, I'm giving a little bit of caveats before he comes loose. Richmond are one of the 3 best teams for our defenders at the moment. They've got a really nice matchup. We know historically teams that aren't likely to win, but are wanting to give champions of their club or legacy AFL players, they funnel the ball through them in this game. A great illustration of that, 2020 Bryce Gibbs retirement game. The Crows' year was done. They're just funneling the football through him to give him one last hurrah. So talk to me about this 1 week play in Jack Ziebell. I know there's some impact that could help us with another 1 week play the following week. But talk me through for a coach that's looking at Ziebell, knows he's got 150 ceiling about him, knows the matchup is right. Talk me through the upside. And then there is a wee part of risk that we just need to flag with Ziebell as well.
If we look at the upside is the price, $6.25. You go from him from probably any premium in your team. You're making money, and it might allow you to make a really big upgrade on the back end. So that might allow you to get up to someone like a Rory Laird. It might allow you to get up to someone like a Clayton Oliver. That's positive. Another positive is he plays really early. He's the first game on the Saturday, which means that if you have a 23rd premium or you've got a pretty good bench rookie or a bench mid-pricer that you want to flick on if he doesn't score well, there's your opportunity to do so. But then there's the caveats. And the caveats are, where is he going to play? And will it remain that way for the entire game?
Yes.
Because, he's looked very, very good when he's played down back. He's looked very good when he's in that role where he's controlling the ball in their D50. But what else has Ziebell done in his career? He's played midfield and he's even played off half forward and deep forward. It was only a couple of years ago where he played key forward for half a season. And, if you've got a player that loves playing key forward and maybe it's in their last game, maybe you want to squeeze him a goal. What's the chance? Maybe at 3/4 time, they just go, all right, Ziebell, that's you done. We're going to try and park you at full forward and try and get you a goal to send you off with.
Yeah.
Could happen.
Could happen.
I'm not saying that it's and this is always the thing with things. We talk about these flags, and it's never that these things are locked in. It's never that they're guaranteed to happen, but it's about thinking it through yourself and thinking, right, what's the probability that they do that? And what's the possible score that he's going to be on at that point? Do I feel comfortable enough jumping into that based on what I deem my assessment to be? Because that's all it is. We can give you these options. We can give you the ideas. We can give you the possible things that might happen to these players, but you have to make the assessment in your head. Is it 15% that he goes forward, or is it 50%, or is it 85%? Who knows? But you can make that assessment yourself, because that's where you can start to differentiate. Because if you think it's 100% that he goes forward halfway through the game, then you're definitely not trading into it. But if you think it's only 5%, then by all means, you would take that risk on.
And I think that's a really important piece, is the beauty of where his fixture in the round lands for coaches is we're really talking about for coaches that are in a critical preliminary final matchup or are heavily pushing for their career best rankings result. Again, that could be top 10, winning the whole thing, top 100, or, for someone listening, it's like, man, if I could get to 3,000 this year, that would be a great outcome. Fantastic. So for a coach that's got nothing to lose, jumping into Ziebell's a piece of cake idea. No problems, run him at F6. But for you, is Ziebell only a F7 loophole option, or can he be an F6, D6 straight play?
It's all about your tolerance for risk. If you are the type of coach that wants to take on a big risk and wants to get a big reward out of it, let's say you want to downgrade a Stephen Cornelio to Jack Ziebell. That's going to net you over $200,000 this week. It's going to open up you for your trades for this week and for next week as well. It's a risk that you can take. If you get to Friday night and you're right, all 22 of my premiums are playing, I want to make some cash. I want to do an upgrade because there's a mid premium or a defender premium that I want to target. And I know that I'm going to have the cash to be able to do my trades for next week with this move, and be able to move Ziebell on, then you go for it. But if you're risk averse and you're thinking, I don't want to take that risk on, I just don't have enough, certainty that it's going to go the way that I think it goes, then that's when you go, no, that's not for me. So it's all about your risk appetite.
It's this interesting space as we look through the last 5 weeks of just trends of data. And that's all we are when it's just games of 1 or 2, this is where those that have played any form of daily fantasy, again, either casually, just for fun and doing the free games, or those that have spent a little bit more time investigating and investing financially in the more, let's just call it, the flat-out gambling approaches of fantasy footy through there. They've got that level and appetite of risk that they're a bit more used to than maybe a classic or a draft coacher has had where they put them on the field. So I want to look at the fixture in a moment, but it's this interesting junction of the year where everything can look good on paper. But like you said, just because the matchup, the data, the trend is there, doesn't mean it's going to happen.
No, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but you've got to look at what are the other options around him at that price.
Yeah, that's a good
as
call.
well. So if you're looking in that 600 to 700K bracket, there's actually quite a few very interesting options in there. And a lot of it's because of the sub through the season. We've got players like Tom Mitchell, who's very cheap because of the sub. Paddy Lipinski, who's very cheap because of the sub. Patrick Dangerfield's injuries. Same with Isaac Smith to an extent. Wayne Miller injuries. But there's a couple that scream out to players. George Hewitt and Bailey Smith.
They're on fire at the moment.
Not
these
Smith,
two
are absolutely not Smith, but George Hewitt's on fire. He's got to enroll in that midfield now. It's definitely at least a 2-week punt, but it could be a 1-week punt based on who comes back for Carlton next week. So he's worth looking at. And then Bailey Smith is worth looking at, not just because of the matchup, but because of who's gone out of that team.
Yeah.
Tom Liberatore has moved out. Who moved inside after that point? It was a bit of Baz. There's a bit of a few others. But what's going to happen in that Eagles game? And if he does get pushed forward, there is the potential that he pops an 80, 90, 100, 110 score, and he's basically the same price. So whenever you're looking at these sorts of plays, look at the other options as well, because all I've heard from a few podcasts this week is Jack Ziebell is a very interesting option if you want to take the 1-week punt.
Sure.
Why not take the 1-week punt on someone else like Bailey Smith? Why not take it on someone like George Hewitt, who could turn into a 2-week punt?
You've got a Matt
Just
Crouch,
have these ideas in your head.
who's at 759. You've got someone like a Hayden Young, who's at 764. Again, the matchup's not amazing, but he's scoring through that midfield and doing some nice things. Of the past 6 weeks, Tom Atkins has got 3 120 plus scores. Redmond, Bolton, Impey. Now, I'm not saying go and pick these guys, but really what I am trying to say is don't just get so laser focused on the one option that you think is there. There are dozens of plays that what you can do. And when you're at this point of the year, when you're just looking for a 1 or a 2-week hit, you just need 1 or 2 variables to go your way. And it can be a 200-point difference in just a one positional move. If we are looking at the matchups, there are really 3 or 4 brilliant ones. We know that key forwards and forwards in general against West Coast is a really nice matchup, which brings not just the Crows into picture for next week, but the Western Bulldogs into play this week. That's an interesting one. It's a high risk play there, probably outside of Daniel or Bailey Smith in terms of key position forwards, like a Norton and a Ugle-Hagan feels risky, but we know at Marvel, it's a different Bulldogs. Any of those enough to tempt you, or would you rather detour to a Ziebell type forward 1-week play and then jump on to an Adelaide?
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Pro next week.
I'm not sure I could go to McRae with any confidence. I think Bailey Smith is interesting because he's got that workload. He's actually looked okay despite his scoring not being that great.
I agree.
Caleb Daniel to an extent as well, but he gets thrown around a fair bit. It's very hard to recommend him with a huge amount of confidence, but if you've got him, you're probably looking to hold him anyways. But if you're looking at Ugle-Hagan and Norton, I mean, we're just talking about Tex as being someone who can pop a ceiling game. Those two can as well. They're very good masters of the ball. They both push up the ground. They both know how to find space, and there's every chance they can pop a decent score as well. Now, it's not as appealing as the Tex matchup for round 24 because they play the first game on the Sunday and it's a bit later, so it makes that looping a bit trickier.
Agree.
But it's worth having a look at if you have a forward or even a defender or a midfielder that you're wanting to loop off if they do pop a good score and you can swing that DPP. So
a Rosie and a Butters might be able to move into the midfield for you with that final game around. So there's options for you there. Others that are favourable historically on trend, the Bulldogs defenders is equally as good, if not better, than key position forwards against the Eagles. So it could be a very high scoring. That portion of the ground could be very, very high. Rucks against Brisbane, but let's talk about Rucks for a minute. Marshall and English both have the best matchups they could pretty much possibly have. And if you are looking for anyone other than those two, it's probably because you're looking for someone like a Luke Jackson to squeeze in your forward. So the only reason you're probably looking to trade into a ruck is you're trying to minimize the damage of English or Marshall if you don't have either of them, which, again, highly popular in the top ranked teams.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'll just skip back to that defender point that you were making before. Who else is retiring pretty soon?
Mm-hmm.
Shannon Hearn.
Mm-hmm.
He is a player that I actually owned in the end of the 2022 season in SuperCoach, and it's a fun ride. He's a very fun player to own. And if the Eagles want to give him a good farewell, why not chip the ball into his hands under the deck as well? I mean, they've got a couple of reasonable matchups. They've got, the Dogs under the Dome, and then they've got Adelaide back home. It's not the worst option if you're looking to try and take a punt. It's going to be cheap. It's one to look at if you really want to have a bit of an interesting time.
From a midfield perspective.
And the Rucks.
Yeah, well, the Rucks, we've talked about that. Let's be honest.
The Rucks are the Rucks. It's those three. It's those three. And if you own Max Gawn, consider getting to one of those three if you can.
I think that's right. With or without Grundy playing this week, we just don't know. But yeah, I think you're right. Mids is interesting because, again, we've talked about Geelong have got a really nice 2-week fixtural perspective. Adelaide against the Swans defenders, it's not horrible. It's pretty neutral, to say the least. But, I probably wouldn't jump on Tex a week early. I'd rather look at the 7 or 8 forwards we listed earlier in that sort of 700 to 750 range, or go all the way down to Ziebell and jump on there. But mids is interesting because that's where I think there could be a few coaches that do have a few pain points. And it's this interesting thing. Corey Blackledge, one of our Patreons, sent me this question for AFL Fantasy. He's got Neil, Steele and Himmelberg. And these are the types of players that people are thinking of moving on this week. Is Neil's been underwhelming, but had a really nice, probably 6-week patch off the back of the buys. Steele's, as early as a fortnight ago, people were trading into him because the 120s were there. And then Himmelberg, I don't think he's been bad, but barring 2 or 3 games, he also hasn't been great for coaches this year. So if these are the types of players, Corey's a great illustration for the types of people that they're looking to move off. If you've got this sort of move, is it easier to maneuver and make changes as opposed to coaches that are going, my worst offender is Hayden Young. My worst forward is Stephen Cornelio. My worst mid is Christian Petrarca. Again, that I use worst very loosely as a term, but you almost would prefer to be in that sort of situation for Corey, wouldn't you? Where it feels like you've got easier pathways out.
Yeah, I mean, that's why some people were having a bit of the sicko in them, as some coaches like to say, and they were hoping, well, maybe Doherty does get a rest this week. Maybe they don't play in this week. And, for his sake and for a lot of other coaches' sake, he is playing this week. Mm-hmm. But when you have those 4 types of options, those players that are clearly underperforming, clearly not the top of the line, that don't have what you want them to have, it makes it much easier to be able to say, right, I want to jump off of them, because there's a lot of talk about players like Crouch and Steele that people want to jump off of. Or if you look at the forward line, as you said before, Cornelio, it's very hard to trade off these players because you know what they've done in the past, and you know what they've done this season. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago that Crouch went 126 without touching the ball in the last quarter.
Yeah.
Steele's had 130 games. Cornelius had 130 games. You look down back, someone like Stewart, who had a poor game on the weekends, had 130 games.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be on the receiving end of a good score out of one of these types of players, because if you're trading out of them, they're probably pretty highly owned. They're going to become an antipod against you.
Mm-hmm.
And if they pop a good score, that hurts. So sometimes you've got to look at, what are people around me doing? Do I think I have a better team than them? Do I think I have a worse team than them? Do I want to take a risk on and trade out of someone like Caleb Sarong or someone like Jack Sinclair because I don't like them fixtures over the next two? That's how you can kind of make an edge. But if you think you have the better team, then you go, right, let's get rid of those lower owned players. Let's get rid of, someone like I might use my team for example. Let's get rid of someone like an Angus Brayshaw, who's very lowly owned, or a Luke Jackson, and try and Sheasel again, for example. These sorts of players where you can kind of come back towards the pack and match teams because you think everywhere else on the ground I'll beat them. Match them on this player because then I can beat them all around the ground as well.
And we're used to during the year now, and some love rolling lockouts, some hate them. But for those that are in league finals and for those that are pushing for personal high or a token of success, so to speak, whether it be a hat or something like that in AFL fantasy, you've got to maximize the loopholes available to you this week and the timing of the fixture, not just for the VCC option, but for the timing of the trades and the positioning of the players as well.
Have a look at the trades that you're looking to pull. Have a look at who's going to be moving out, who's going to be moving in. Have a look at the rookies that are playing this week. We have teams now. We know that Jack Buller is playing. If he was a red dot on your bench that you've been using to loop with, don't look at doing that this week because that's not going to work. Have a look at where they lie. People are really looking at going Marshall into English as their vice captaincy into captaincy this week. Who do you have playing after Rowan Marshall plays? Who do you have not playing after Rowan Marshall plays? Because there's only 3 games afterwards that you could really look at. And if you don't have a red dot and he goes 140, that's going to hurt. So really have a think about that. And then, as you said, map out the trades. Map out you saying, right, well, I'm going to be pulling my first trade on Saturday afternoon. I need to move this player into this position. This is what I'd be doing with my second trade. Do I still have that DPP flexibility to be able to move the players around that I need to do?
Yeah, it's good.
Just have a look at it and investigate it before you kind of lock in your trade, and have a few contingencies as well. Because even if you don't have 23 premiums, even if you've only got 22, if you have some red dots and you've got some rookies that might be playing, maybe put someone like a Darcy Cameron on the bench. Maybe put someone like a Josh Dunkley on the bench. Maybe put someone like a Jaden Short on the bench just to have a look at their score before all your rookies lock out. Because if they get injured on 10, if they get injured on 15, if they get knocked out or they get subbed out early, at least then you can get 20, 30 points. And that might be the difference in some of your league matchups. So just have a think about what you can do and utilize the system to the best advantage you can.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. So again, if we want to look about teams that play late, Port Adelaide, Fremantle, last game of the round. So Rosie, Butters, Sarong, Brayshaw. Probably the interesting one that you mentioned, the 2 ruck loopholes. Do you have a Vizentini? He could be your pathway to be able to do it. Because if you've got Max Heath, that doesn't help you at all. You're now looking at, are you going earlier in the round with your loopholes? Is it all of a sudden, is it a Dunkley? Is it a Taranto? Is it a Merritt? Like whatever it is, like look at those elements and the positioning of the things through there. We'll wrap up the episode soon, but for coaches that are deep into the finals of rankings, and then finals of rankings is not really the fair term, but top 100 is, in fact, it's just plain wrong, MJ. But top 100's their goal. Top 10's their goal. I think there's a handful of coaches that can legitimately claim the Hilux this year. And there's that's about it. And that's okay. That's not uncommon at this time of year in any format.
No, it's not uncommon.
if you're in a rank, if you are pushing for a hat, let's focus in that space for a minute, and you look at your team, we've alluded this a bit more, but I'd like to dig down on 2 points you've made. You look at the fixtures and you see a couple of nice 1 weekers this week and then some nice 1 weekers next week. How is it risky to go, I'm going to do and just these are names, not saying what people should do. I'm getting Ziebell in this week. I'm allowing $100,000 in my kitty to make an easy pathway maneuver to a Taylor Walker, and just go matchup to matchup. Sure, makes sense. But is there an element of risk in doing that for coaches? I know everything's got an element of risk, but how much risk is involved in that? Because trading into a Ziebell is trading into a red dot next week unless you can get off Ziebell.
It's a high risk, high reward play.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's the risk that you have to get off Ziebell. It's the risk that he plays the role that you hope he plays. It's the risk that he pops a score that's good enough for you to take. It's the risk that he generates a bit of cash in the process of doing so as well. And it's the combined risk that you don't have any other moves in your team that can net you as much points as jumping off of Ziebell and moving to someone like Tex.
Yeah.
And you got to look at your team and you have to think, right, am I just going to Ziebell because then it's an easy pathway to Tex next week? Or am I going to Ziebell because it's the right thing to do for my team? Is Tex Walker the player that I do want to have in round 24? Yes, that matchup is really good, but with how much is being talked about, I'm expecting very high ownerships of Tex Walker in round 24 up in the high ranks.
In the top 100.
I wouldn't be shocked to see 50 or 60 people in the top 100 at the end of the season own Tex Walker and have him at F7 with a emergency on him and have a look at the score.
And he is a Saturday
night. Is that the right
guy.
play?
Yeah.
Yeah. So who are you taking off if you do that? Have a look at that pathway as well, because you need to look. Yeah. You've got 4 trades left. The pathways that you have left are narrowing down. You don't have as many options of players that you're wanting to move in and out. So have a look at it. Have a look. If I do Jack Ziebell to Tex Walker in round 24, who am I trading out as well? What's my loophole option if Tex Walker doesn't pop on the Saturday night? What's the option if he only pops like a 40 or a 50 and I don't want to take that score? Yeah. These are the types of conversations you need to have a think about, because again, it's your risk appetite.
Yep.
I said it. It's a high risk, high reward play. There's no denial that it could definitely play off, and both of these players could go 130s over the next 2 weeks, but know what all the other variables involved are.
Yeah, it's a really good bit of advice. All right, we'll wrap up the episode in a minute. I'm gonna throw you a little curveball as we wrap up the podcast, though. We're going to get MiniMonk instinct for a second. We're going to go through the defenders, the mids, and the forwards. It's first thoughts. I'm going to give you a price range, and I want you to give me your 2 first. This is not a prepped thing, ladies and gentlemen, as you're listening to this. It's giving him to hear for you. It's my initial instinct reaction, not researched, not calculated, not thought out. I'm going to go through the positions. I'm going to ignore the rucks, and we'll go through positions. And the context is for this: a player you'd be happy to own for the 2 weeks. Again, so I'm asking a lot of you because I'm going gut instinct fixture, and that's really all it is along the way. So a bit of high pressure to throw MiniMonk under the bus. We're about to see just how good Harry Sheasel is for the fantasy footy community. I'm going to disregard the 900,000 defenders because there's only 2.
Okay,
it's Dawson and Sicily. So we're going to move them out. Of the defenders that are priced over 800,000 and under 900,000, if there were 2 you wanted to own for the next 2 weeks and wanted to trade into a defender between 800 and 900,000, who are the 2 that have the most appeal for you?
Deciding which credit card or loan is right for you is like trying to choose where you want to eat for dinner. Except when you finally get to the restaurant, the menu's riddled with jargon that no average foodie could understand. So at Credit Karma, we keep things simple. We show you personalized recommendations that align with your money goals and help you turn the confusing fine print into terms you can actually understand. And as a cherry on top, we provide a detailed overview for a new card or loan before you apply. That way, we can help you make decisions faster and with more confidence. Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
Will Day and Lockie Whitfield.
Nice. I like that. Talk to me about the Whitfield one, because I think a lot of people have flirted with Day this year, but Whitfield, ownership-wise, only 3.8% across the entirety of that, and pretty similarly low ownership in the top 100, top 1,000 in AFL Fantasy. I think he's only owned by, 4% of the top 100. So really, really lowly owned. What's Whitfield got your attention there for people?
He's been criminally underrated this year for how good he's actually been because he's missed games through injuries. He got injured in that first round, missed round 2. He got injured just after the bye and missed round 16. But aside from that, he's been a fairly safe 90 and he's got a good couple of matchups.
Yeah, he does. All right. 2 defenders between 700,000 and no more than 800,000. So your cutoff is Scott from the North Melbourne Football Club. Who are the 2 that you go, if I had to have them for 2 weeks, these are the 2 guys that I would look to?
Mitch Duncan.
Yep. High risk. I love it.
Hayden Young.
Yeah. Okay. Little bit of purple haze just coming out of you there, or is that role related?
I'm going a bit more potty with these options as well.
Yeah, of course you are.
Under that 800k barrier, there aren't many that.
Well, Jaden Short's around there, but
top.
You know.
Yeah, sure. Yes, the role.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been playing inside midfield roles. Yes, he's got a couple of tougher matchups against Port Adelaide and Hawthorn, but if he's going to be playing the role that he is, where he's tagging, one thing we know about those games is they're going to be contested games.
Yes.
And that if they're contested games, he's going to be getting a lot of tackles because that's where his bulk scoring and bulk increase in scoring over the last couple of weeks has been. He's normally a, 1, 2, 3 tackle a game player. In the past 5 games that he's played, he's had 3 games where he's had 8 or more tackles.
It's good. And then lastly, 2 players under 700,000. Because we could go all the way down and be like, yes, let's look at Isaac Quaynor. We're not going to do that. No offense to Isaac. He's a brilliant human being. But if there were 2 defenders under 700,000 that you were owning for 2 weeks, so it's discounting Ziebell out of this conversation. We've spent a lot of time on him on this episode. But 2 defenders for 2-week play. Who you're looking at?
But are we going to go real risky? I mean...
Oh, yeah, give
Jack
us the
Ziebell.
real risky one. Yeah, okay. He's not playing 2 weeks.
Do you want the real risky one?
Yeah, I think I know
the
who
real
you're
risky
going
one
for.
is Elliot Yeo.
Yes. Thank you very much.
It's Elliot Yeo.
Yeah,
he's
I love it.
Cheap. And he's got the Dogs matchup this week. So if you want to go bang for your buck pick.
Oh, yeah. There is another just as crazy one. Kitty Coleman's just as risky, mate.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just as risky.
I get it. I don't like Kitty Coleman just as much because I've owned him in the past.
Yeah,
I know what he can be like. I know he's got the ceiling, but it's just a little bit more scary.
Yeah, I understand that concern as well. All right, give us one more outside of Yo, under 700,000 that you're like, if I had to go there based on other variables, it's Yo, or is there nobody else? It's not pretty, mate.
Jeez.
It's
not pretty, is it?
Ed Richards, maybe? Maybe.
Maybe Ed Richards. Miller? No, you're not going Miller.
I'm just trying to get a crow.
I know you're an
in
Adelaide
there.
man.
You're
not
just
going
get
Miller.
one in. No, you don't.
Can we go one of the cheaper options? Corey Wagner.
There you go.
He's got the role.
Here comes.
He's got the role now.
Haze. He does have the role now. I totally agree with that. All right, let's go the forwards, and then we'll do that for the mids before we wrap up the episode. Again, going to discount the 900,000 plus. In fact, we're going to pretty much say anyone from Butters up we're not even considering. So anyone over 800,000, we're not going to talk about Goulden, Rosie, Dunkley, Taranto, or Cornelio.
Sure.
Or Butters, just again purely so highly owned. But between 800,000 and 700,000, a forward that's a 2-week play, who are you trading into?
Could it be anyone else? I think it has to be Luke Jackson. I think it's probably the most obvious one, and for good reason.
Yep.
I think he's got the role and he's looked really good. He's got the easy matchup this week. Yes, the round 24 matchup isn't as easy, but if he scrapes an 80 against the Hawks Rocks, you'd probably take that in round 24.
100%. Yep.
Maybe a cheaper option you could look at,
Flanders
Yeah.
and Sheasel are around there.
Flanders,
Yeah.
Jeremy Cameron.
Ooh, don't mind that.
I mean, yeah, he's a key forward, but I don't think you've seen many key forwards that run the ground quite as well as he does. He pushes down into D50 and gets involved in the +6 chains every now and then.
Yes, he does.
And he's had, again, a very good season, and his price is a little bit lower than what it has been because about 5 weeks ago, he got knocked out on -3. And up until that point, he was averaging something like, 90 odd for the season.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
He's
All
one
right.
you could have a flight up.
Give me 2 forwards under 700,000. This is as low as we'll go with the forwards. Again, you don't want to be heading down into the territories where you're looking at a Phillips and a Finlayson and a Fogarty for your last 2 weeks of fantasy footy. So between under 700,000, who are 2 guys that you go, you know what? If I had to, because it gets me the secondary player I want, and that's probably what we're settling for here. Who are the sub 700 forwards that you've got a bit of a sneaky eye on?
You know what? I might just go a pair of Collingwood boys. Taylor Adams.
Yep.
And Paddy Lipinski.
Yep. Get some midfield minutes and away you go. I like it. I like it. All right, let's go to the mids and then we'll wrap up this episode. Again, deliberately putting MiniMonk in horrible positions that I know we will get off the podcast to be like, MJ, you flog. Why did you do that to me? And I go, that's okay. We're going to help some people through. Now, there's 2 players over $1 million that are mid-eligible. We're going to not talk about them, but I do want to talk about the pick of the bunch of the 900,000 brigade. So Goulden and Bont, scrap them from your list. If you could pick 2, now again, Rosie, Dawson, they technically sit in this group, but they're in other lines. So let's discount them. So we're talking Parrish, Brayshaw, Viney, Brad Crouch, Sarong, Petrarca, Laird, Merritt, Oliver. If you had to own, if you wanted to trade into 2, Merritt is 100% owned in the top 100, so let's strike him out too. If you want to own 2 players over 900,000 for the next 2 weeks, first thought, MiniMonk, who are you going to?
It's the 2 that we talked about earlier on in the pod. It's Laird and Oliver.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go under 900,000 then. But over 800,000. There's some nice names that are through there again. We're going to discount the DPP options. So the Wanganeen Millerers, the Whitfields, the Days, the Sinclairs, the Cornelios. We're going to strike them all out of that. And yes, Dunkley and Taranto are in that list as well. Over 800,000. Under 900,000. A midfielder for 2 weeks. Who would you be happy to take a little bit of a flight and trade into for a 2 weeks of fun?
Trelaw?
Yeah.
McCluggage?
Yeah. Yeah. Why Trelaw? Because I know why, but talk people through Trelaw, because that, again, is a name that people are going, oh, no, I don't think Trelaw's a good pick.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
I mean, if you look at the Dogs last week, they got smothered in that second half, not just in terms of the ball use, but in terms of fantasy points. They couldn't touch the darn pill. So it's no wonder that Trelaw only scored a 70 odd. It's no wonder that Bont barely scraped his way to a 100 score. You know, these are the types of players that you would normally see rack up 110s, 120s, 130s. But the matchup this week is West Coast. And the matchup in round 24, it's Adelaide.
For the Bulldogs.
Oh, sorry, Geelong.
Yeah, Geelong.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, for the Dogs.
You were talking
Geelong.
about West
My
Coast.
bad.
That's all right.
But
you got West Coast focused.
we got West Coast focused. But he's had the role all season. You know, we've talked about how the midfield mix for the Dogs has been all over the shop at time, but the three consistent ones they've run through the midfield for the majority of this season has been Liberatore, Treloar, and Bontempelli.
And there's no
Liver's not there.
Week.
Yeah. It's going to be 80% CBAs for Treloar, and the matchup is just too good this week.
And he's a goal scoring mid too, so that's a hugely important outcome. All right, you can't get up to 800,000. So in fact, we'll allow Newcomb at 800,000.
All right,
and then we're going no less than 700,000. I think that's where we might wrap up the mids. This is as low as we go. You've got two guys to own. The DPP options are not available to you. Between 700,000 and 800,000 on the money, who are the two mids? You go, you know what? For 2 weeks, MJ, I'm happy to jump on.
I think one stands out very quickly to me in Matt Crouch.
Agree.
I think he's probably the obvious option of that sub 800K group. Gosh, if we want to take a punt on a second player out, why not your boy? Josh Kelly, 782K.
Get around him.
Very, very cheap. Too cheap for someone who has 120 potential.
I want to say a name that I hate saying, but of all the guys in this list, he's, to memory, he's the only pure mid that has 4 tons in a row. Now, he hasn't played 4 games in a row, but he's got 4 tons in a row. I'm alluding to Carl Amon. I don't like saying it at all, and I feel like I lose credibility with it. He's coming off a 138 and 3 tons before that. Now, I don't think he tonned up it outside of the past 4 games. But you want to play it, go all in on poker, Melbourne and Fremantle. I don't love it, but what's your initial first take? Again, you're picking him over a Matt Crouch, which I don't like in that 50-50 selection. But for coaches that, I don't know, want to dance with their sister, would you be happy to suggest Amon?
Oh, man, I just have to look at who they played in their last 4. And if you think about players that could rack up with a lot of space, Richmond, St Kilda, Collingwood, the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah.
It's a match made in heaven for people that get involved in the +6 chains like he has been. I don't think I could go there.
Yeah, North Melbourne.
If he was 650K, I'd consider it. But
and it got you to another player that you really wanted to own, and he was your settling. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I don't like it. If I was to say their last 4 was 105, 109, 100, and 138, everyone would go, oh, that's interesting to me. But sometimes you just need to, as MiniMonk has done, unpack the narrative of Richmond, Bulldogs, North Melbourne are 3 of those teams that he scored those tons against. Sure, great in drafts, fine to take the punt in your daily fantasy, but yeah, you want that man in your classic team for the next 2 weeks? Okay.
If you want to go the winger type player who can score a big score this week and the next week as well,
please.
It's a man that Rids mentioned a few weeks ago, about 10 weeks ago, he probably mentioned this player. And since then, he's been an absolute jet of a player for fantasy purposes, especially for draft owners. Bailey Scott.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. He's been one of the picks of the year in draft, hasn't he? There always is these sort of guys like Bailey where lowly owned, barely drafted based on their ADP. You pick them up after they pop one decent score and you go, man, if I can get 2 or 3 80s out of him, I'll be happy. And all of a sudden, Scott, for some leagues in draft, could be their D2. Maybe even higher if some things have gone pear-shaped. So that's the interesting thing. I thought we wanted to do that exercise with MiniMonk again. For you, as you're listening to the podcast, these are the things you're looking at. You're looking at the fixtures. You're looking at the matchups. You're looking at the unique variables. You're looking at the limited cash and how the combination of trades can come. You're looking at 1 week plays in Ziebell. You're looking at, I don't want to get entrapment in, and 2 weeks and the moves you can make this week that sets you up for the moves in the final week of 2023. It's why Just wanted to full blitzkrieg him and surprise him with that. So well done, MiniMonk. Again, we'll give the trade of, preparation pending. He might give you some distant advice, but hopefully that's helped you. We might wrap up the episode there, MiniMonk. As always, you've been an absolute superstar on this podcast and pretty much every single one you've done with us and for the fantasy community in 2023.
It's been a pleasure, and no hard feelings for you dropping that on me right at the end of the pod.
Yeah, okay, good. All right. We're going to be just fine. That's all right. If you want to go and keep in touch with MiniMonk or any of the other members of the coaches panel, one of the easiest ways to connect with them is become part of our Patreon supporter group. For just a few dollars a month, you can join the basement tier as a cash cow, or you can jump up as a premium tier Patreon, and there are a bunch of different tiers and rewards, access to hidden content, hidden groups, additional podcasts, and a bunch of other stuff. All the details, if you do want to become a Patreon supporter, you can find in the details of this podcast description. And you might be going, MJ, there's 2 weeks left in the year. What's the point of that? Here's what I'll tell you. From September, for any level of Patreon and for our Spotify podcast subscribers, again, the link's in the description. If you choose to listen to podcasts on Spotify, and that's where you're listening to this, you will get, as a Spotify subscriber, you will get our top 50 keeper ranks. 8 tiers, 8 episodes, helping you understand who we believe are the best keeper prospects, and then plenty of other off-season content. We won't make it publicly available to everybody else, but we'll be unpacking the trade analysis period. We'll be working through all the positions, all the prices, and everything as we build towards 2024. So you might be like, I'll wait till January to jump on in the 50 most relevant. Sure, you can absolutely do that, but there's plenty of hidden content that only our Patreon and Spotify subscribers get in the off season. Look, we hope for you as you enter into this second to last round of 2023, we hope everything does land your way. We hope that captaincy and vice captaincy plan and scheme you're hatching, that it absolutely pops, that the trades and the loopholes that you're maneuvering through deliver exactly the way you hope, and that from a rankings perspective, you're in a position to strike with 1 week to go. And if you're going for the leagues, we hope you've made and making your way through to the big dance. Good luck in round 23. We can't wait to chat to you again next week for the final official time of the 2023 fantasy footy season.